Good morning, everyone. We'll just give this a second to give people a chance to join. Okay, and you're all very welcome. Okay, I can just see people are just joining us now at the moment, so I'll give people a little bit longer before we kick things off properly. Okay, and we'll kick off. So good morning, everyone, and you're very welcome to this morning's webinar on design and circular economy, which is hosted by Irish Manufacturing Research, Secretariat of CIRCULÉIRE, the National Platform for Circular Manufacturing. My name is Sophie Reynolds, and I'm a circular economy technologist with IMR, and I'll be representing the CIRCULÉIRE team here today, along with some of my colleagues in the background, so Gary Doran and Aderna. So CIRCULÉIRE is a public-private partnership between Irish Manufacturing Research, our strategic partners, the Department for Environment, Climate and Communications, the EPA, EIT Climate Kick, and our 25 founding industry partners. Running between 2020 and 2022, CIRCULÉIRE's mission is to accelerate Ireland's transition towards a net zero carbon circular economy. And a key objective of the programme is to demystify, de-risk and deliver a circular business model innovation for Irish industry. Each year, for the duration of the programme, we co-deliver a series of working groups with our appointed expert facilitators on circular economy topics deemed strategically important to supporting our industry members' transition to a circular economy. Through a series of meetings, ideation workshops and webinars, these working groups bring together a multi-sectoral group of panel members comprised of both CIRCULÉIRE industry members, solution providers, academia and third sector to identify core barriers hampering the development of circular economy with respect to the thematic area, and to work together to co-design innovation proposals that can help move the dial forward in supporting Irish industry's transition to circularity. Past working group topics have included the circular bioeconomy, circular procurement, industrial symbiosis. In September and early October this year, we ran webinars on packaging and reusables in circular economy and circular plastics. For 2021, CIRCULÉIRE's industry members also selected circular design as one of our 3 working group topics for this year. And during today's webinar, CIRCULÉIRE's appointed expert facilitator, Dr. Simon O'Rafferty, who's Associate Director of Strategic Design Consultancy, EMCO, will present the main findings and innovation opportunities identified with input from our over 20 panel members through this working group. Simon was former Head of Research for the UK's Eco Design Centre. In 2017, Simon led the National Economic and Social Council's research on circular economy and produced their report Moving Towards Circular Economy in Ireland, which explored the circular potential for the Irish economy. And was previously also Research Fellow with the Environmental Protection Agency. At EMCO, Simon leads their sustainability and climate projects, primarily in the public sector. So without further ado, I will pass you over to the very capable hands of Dr. Simon O'Rafferty. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sophie. So, and good morning, everyone who's on the call. It's great to see people joining. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to go through a couple of slides, but just to kind of give you a sense of, so what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to give a little bit of a background in terms of the Circular Design Thematic Working Group, the approach that we took, the kind of issues that we explored as a group, and then some of the opportunities that some of the working group members explored from their own business perspective. So I'll probably be speaking for maybe 40 minutes, and I'm going to go through a number of slides, but please do ask questions in the chat function as we're going through. Some questions will be answered immediately by the CIRCULÉIRE team, and then some we'll hold to the end for kind of a Q&A session at the end. And I have asked Sophie to give me an indication about when I'm going to run over time, because it was quite a long process working with the working group, so there's a lot to cover. So I just want to make sure I do all the effort of the working group justice. So I'm just going to go, as I said, I'm going to go through a few slides now. Bear with me 1 second. So hopefully everybody can see my slides. Sophie, can you confirm that you can see?
Yeah, I can see that. It's all good.
Great. So just for those, I know some of the people on the call are probably aware of the kind of the thematic working group process in terms of what we did. But for those that maybe aren't aware or didn't participate, it's kind of a multi-stage process where MCO, we were kind of brought in at the very beginning, initially to produce what was called a state-of-the-art review, which is a kind of a short report which kind of outlines some of the innovative stuff happening around circular design, some of the opportunities that potential opportunities for Ireland, and some of what's happening within I suppose the policy landscape around circular economy, but also more specifically on circular design. And that state of the art review was really about kind of setting out a series of conversations that we had with our thematic working group, and I'll come on to the members of that working group in a second. But really, the state of that review is really just to say this is the start of the discussion, and then working with the working group, we explored, well, what's the potential for Ireland, for CIRCULÉIRE industry members, and for other sectors in Ireland. And after a series of meetings with the working group, we then moved into what we call ideation sessions. So these were 3 workshops consecutively over 3 days to explore in a little bit more detail, opportunities among the working group members and businesses on the working group in terms of circular design innovation opportunities. And so really it was some of the working group members had ideas in mind. And so these workshops really, kind of used some design methods and some design approaches to really explore that a little bit further and push their ideas forward. Then following these ideation workshops, some of the members are starting to work on funding applications and innovation fund applications. But in terms of, I suppose my role or MCO's role really was to then develop a synthesis paper that combined the discussions that we'd had with the working group, some of the bits from the state of the art review, and some of the kind of the findings and outputs from the ideation sessions. And that really just, again, it was a relatively short report considering the amount of ground that we covered. But then we kind of presented that to a CIRCULÉIRE network only webinar. And so there were a number of businesses who are obviously members of CIRCULÉIRE but didn't participate in the working group. And they got to feed in, obviously see what we covered, but also to provide comment and to provide input into the final report. And then so almost the end of the process is today. It seems like it's taken us a while to get here. It's been a good journey. It's been a fun journey, but there's this public webinar, and then in the next week or so you'll receive the final report. So we're looking forward to hopefully having a bit of a discussion today and hearing your questions and maybe pushing us our own thinking forward in terms of as we finalize the report. But just to give you a sense of the thematic working group, I have to say from being the facilitator, it was an absolute pleasure. Just we had a really excellent group, drawn from obviously from industry, from public sector, local authority, from NGOs, and from academia. And so it was just a really, I suppose, dynamic mix of really interesting and interested people to work with. So it actually made my job very, very easy from that perspective. But I suppose one of the things to note with the thematic working group is that we had businesses of all size, from multinationals, right through to SMEs and micro SMEs. So really that kind of helped us to, I suppose, moderate our thinking and how we pitched the report and how we pitched the workshops, because we had to see how circular design could be made relevant for all different sizes of business. And really the working group kind of did a great job of kind of keeping us in check and making sure that everything we were doing was being relevant, practical and implementable. So it was kind of it was great from that perspective. So before I kind of really jump into the presentation fully, we've got 2 polls that we wanted to ask just to kind of get a sense of who's in the room. So we've 2 polls. The first question is, what sector are you representing today? So there's a couple of options there for you to select. And then for maybe more directed, the second question is maybe more directed to those in industry or social enterprises. But the second question is the circular economy a topic that your design teams, and we're thinking that in a very broad sense in terms of marketing, communications, R&D, are they aware of the circular economy, and are they working on it? So if you could just take maybe just 10-15 seconds just to respond to that poll, and it'll give us a kind of a sense of who's in the room and who's working on circular design and circular economy. So I'll leave that run for a couple of seconds, sorry. So Gary, maybe we'll another 10 seconds. We'll do a countdown and then we close. Obviously, people can, if they didn't get to fill it, they can introduce themselves in the chat as well. So give another 10 seconds there. Great. Okay, so we have a mix. What's kind of interesting is we have our greatest proportion is from other. So it'd be very interesting for us, actually, if those who answered other, if you maybe kind of introduce yourself in the chat function and just say what sector you're from, it will just kind of give us a good sense. But we have a mix from kind of pharma, built environment, academia, second life enablers, and then the third sector, which includes kind of NGOs and civil society organizations. And again, kind of interestingly, a large proportion, 84% of those in the room, think that the circular economy has been worked on, by either their design team or marketing, communications, or research. So again, that's very encouraging for us. But as I said, just for those, I'll be intrigued to know who are those in the other. So if you could let us know in the chat, that'd be great. So I'm just going to continue on. So just. And I kind of sometimes laugh when I've used this slide quite a few times during the thematic working group, and but it's really for MCO in terms of how we try to frame the role of design in the circular economy. We said, well, the circular economy begins and ends with design, and it's a bit of a grand statement, but really when we think about design and the role of designers, their day job is designing, making, selling products and services, using insights into customer needs, human behaviors, and market demands. So the role and the purpose of design and designers is around the production of products and services, and so they need to play a central role in terms of how we think about the circular economy and how it's going to work. And kind of what we mean by it begins and ends with. The circular economy begins and ends with design is that actually the decisions that are made at the design table or at the design stage really kind of determine how products, buildings are manufactured. Design determines how the products are used, how they may be reused, how they're repaired, and if they need to be. Design influences in terms of how they are also discarded. And then I suppose importantly from a circular economy perspective, also design can determine the kind of yields of material we can recover from products at end of life and when they recycle. So it's really, design obviously has it's not the only driver of the circular economy, but it has a kind of a key role to play in determining how we approach the circular economy. And when we think about, obviously the role of the circular economy, a lot of the focus is on kind of material and resources. But for a lot of the businesses now working on the circular economy, they're interested in how circular economy and circular design can actually help them to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and implement climate mitigation strategies. And actually, it's one of the things that's probably been missing from the kind of the public discussion around climate for the last kind of decade or so, where the focus has been very much on energy and how we produce energy, but actually, around 45% of greenhouse gas emissions are determined by how we design our buildings, how we design our clothing, how we design our food, how we design our vehicles and cars and other products. And so, if it's now sort of broadly accepted that if we are to meet our kind of commitments under the Paris Accord and whatever commitments are going to come out of COP in the next couple of weeks, we can't not move toward the circular economy. And again, design has a significant role to play in that. I mean, when we started the discussion with the working group, I mean, one of the things that, we kind of discussed, people have ideas in their mind about what constitutes good design, but also what constitutes bad design. But what I find is often people, when they think about design, they think about the end product or the service, and they think about it in terms of the technical aspects of design, in terms of material specification, styling, usability, and all those kind of other factors, which obviously is a kind of a key part of design. But we know that the decisions that designers make have strong influences kind of downstream in terms of sourcing of materials, for the production of components or other materials used within products. And again, these have significant environmental impacts, and we're dealing with issues of criticality of certain materials, particularly within low carbon and electronic products. So the choices that you make in terms of material selection have significant impacts downstream. But also the design choices have significant implications in terms of manufacturing and how we're actually producing and making products, and the efficiencies around that, and the capabilities that are needed to produce products, and we're obviously designing waste out of the production system as much as possible. Also, design has significant implications. Obviously, once the product is made, design influences, I suppose the retail and distribution of products, and again, we're seeing design in the kind of the broad sense, from everything from, marketing, packaging, and other aspects, but it has a significant influence in terms of consumer choice, and maybe driving overconsumption in some areas or underconsumption in other areas. Designers also have a significant, influence on product use, and for some sectors, circular sectors, it's actually the use phase of the products that would have the biggest environmental impact. But actually, designers are involved in kind of crafting the experiences and shaping behaviors around how people use products. And in one respect, they're kind of designing out or making circularity difficult, but also the potential for design to be very user-centered and actually understand how to make circularity easy for the public. And as I said, like the influences, the design choices can influence things like the repairability of products. This is a situation where we've moved very far away from the design choices. And actually, if issues to do, such as repairability, aren't built in at the design stage, it makes it very costly, inexpensive, or impossible to do once the product needs to be repaired. So these considerations need to be brought in at the design stage. And I suppose a focus for a lot of people is actually at the end of life, in terms of the ability to recycle, recover, repair materials from products, again, is determined at the design stage. And if the choices around how we're going to recover materials or extend the life of products or to repair them isn't taken, it makes it costly both for businesses but also for society, in terms of trying to recover materials at ever decreasing amounts from ever increasing waste streams. So just before I move on to the next bit, this is how we kind of framed the wider impact of design within the circular economy. But we're just going to do another quick poll, just as maybe it's a little bit of a cheeky question, but I've kind of mentioned at a very high level some of the impacts or things that the design influences within the circular economy. But we're just interested to ask the audience, what do they think is the percentage of a product's environmental impact that is locked in at the design stage? And so we just give this in just 15 seconds thereabouts. But it'd just be interesting to see, does the audience have a sense of how big an impact design can have? So if you if you can answer that, maybe Gary, we'll give it 10 seconds. Thanks, Gary. Okay, so there's a bit of a spread there. Some people said no impact, which is kind of interesting. And actually, I suppose the greatest proportion of responses, but it's only 33%, said 80%. And this is obviously a it's a bit of a contentious figure that's kind of put out there, but it's generally accepted at least at a policy level and European Commission level that up to 80% of a product's environmental impact is determined at the design stage. And obviously we know that this is different for different types of products, but again, invariably, no matter what the product is, the proportion of impact is significant, as I said, up to 80%. And the further we move away from the design stage, the harder it is to institute or implement any circularity practices and stuff. So again, I think it's quite interesting just seeing the balance there, in terms of the level of impact. So again, these are kind of some of the stuff that we kind of went through with the working group. We were sort of saying, okay, design has a broad impact, both in terms of material specification and product strategy and these kind of issues. And we started to think, well, how do we actually define what we mean by circular design? Because there's no single or kind of common definition. And I suppose from my side, I tried to make it as simple as possible. That circular design, it's about creating products, services, buildings, infrastructure, and systems for the circular economy. And there's no point making it any more complicated than that. But with some of the discussions that we had with the thematic working group, obviously there's a lot of initial focus on products, initial focus on services, and maybe buildings. But we, in terms of MCO, we were sort of saying, well, actually, we need to be thinking about circularity in terms of how we design infrastructure, how we design our cities, and how we design systems that actually enable circularity across the public. And what we mean by systems, we mean everything from how we design our, recycling systems to our retail systems. And but again, if we're going to design anything, it needs to be designed with circular considerations. And again, we try to make it as simple as possible. In the working group, there were a couple of designers, and I suppose the kind of ask of designers typically is to use their creativity and ingenuity to provide value to consumers and to businesses. But really, it's the ask now is to keep doing that, but also ensuring that circularity is both viable from a business perspective and a policy perspective and a regulatory perspective, but it's also desirable from a consumer perspective. And that actually, we need to be adapting to human behavior to make sure that actually circularity is something that people want and will accept and will adopt new behaviors for. One of the kind of things that we sort of, obviously a lot of the discussion at the early stage of the working group was that there's quite a strong technical focus in circular design in terms of material specification, life cycle assessment, carbon footprinting, all these kind of other issues. But actually one of the things that, I suppose MCO we're kind of emphasizing is actually one of the values that designers bring is this idea of understanding changing consumer demands and changing market expectations. For example, we're seeing this accelerated migration to digital, probably accelerated even further because of COVID, and people are starting to live digital lives in some respects. And actually, it's the opportunities around that for designing kind of product service systems and using digital services to enable circularity is something that designers will be quite in tune in terms of how we can do that. So it's not just circular design is not just a technical challenge, it's also a human challenge, and it's also a behavior challenge, and designers can bring those different insights together quite well. Some of the discussions we had with the working group is in terms of how different businesses manage design. As a sort of, we kind of said, well, some businesses would have no in-house design capability, and they'll just buy in design services from design consultants. Some businesses will have in-house design capability, but it might be distributed, across the world or across the country. And then, some companies would have design capability at a very high level within the business, at C-suite or, at kind of strategy level. So we had to think about, for all these different types of ways design is used in different businesses, what's the value designers can bring when working in, when businesses are trying to transition towards a circular economy. And so some of the things that we pulled out is, designers typically work in cross-functional teams. And what we mean by that is that, there's, circular economy or circularity isn't an issue that can be resolved by one part of a business. It requires collaboration across across different business functions, and actually designers and design teams can be quite adept at facilitating and making that type of cross-functional work happen. Design is obviously driven by continuous iteration, and this becomes obviously a contentious issue in terms of ever shorter cycles of new product development, but it's also in terms of MCO's perspective, what we were saying was that actually it's very difficult for an existing or an established businesses to at a wholesale level transition towards a circular economy, and it can be a long journey, and so there needs to be multiple steps taken in terms of implementing circularity with maybe one product first, and then scaling that out across kind of product portfolios and other activities. But again, this idea that circularity and circular design is part of maybe an innovation cycle that that can actually drive circularity forward. Another aspect when we were talking about circular design, obviously from a business perspective, quite often circular design is bringing in new knowledge and insights into the design process, whether that be new user insights or new market insights, but also insights in terms of life cycle assessment or material assessment, and actually that can then be used upstream within the business to inform kind of strategy, communications, and kind of wider analytics, particularly around greenhouse gas emission reductions. And as businesses are starting to move towards reporting on scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, actually having a very strong circular design capability within the business can inform those strategies. And obviously importantly, design can craft user experiences. So sometimes the difficulty with circular economy is that it remains strategy, and it doesn't become implementable or understandable or desirable or wanted by customers or consumers. So designers can kind of bridge that gap between strategy, what business wants, and what customers want and need. So again, within the working group, we were kind of quite clear from the beginning. We were kind of going from those very broad discussions around what the role design could play, and the influence design can have on the circular economy. And then we just started to look a little bit more at from the business perspective, and we sort of said, well, look, design, it effectively touches on almost every phase of production and consumption. So everything from sourcing of materials to manufacturing, logistics, distribution, marketing, retail, use, end of life disposal, and reverse logistics. So it's not it's not a single or a siloed function within business. And so because of that, we kind of looked at I suppose a handful of what we call sort of circular design strategies. We didn't look at every possible strategy. We picked a few that we thought were relevant to CIRCULÉIRE members. And as a working group, we kind of discussed these and looked at kind of case examples from lots of other companies, other sectors, some that are directly relevant to CIRCULÉIRE and some that are outside of CIRCULÉIRE, different sectors. And so the kind of the strategies that we were thinking about were obviously to do with circular supply chain, which is really very much around material selection or the transition to renewable materials. Dematerialisation, so thinking about material selection, and thinking about obviously reducing the weights of products and the weights of materials. We were looking at product durability, so how to design in higher levels of product quality and extend product life that way. We looked at different aspects of what we call product life extension, so different strategies or different ways of designing products. So whether it's modular design or designing for repair, so that effectively users can actually extend the life of the product. And then we looked at issues around recovery and recycling, and which would include issues to do with remanufacturing, and actually how to kind of close that loop within the business's own product portfolio. And then the one that's kind of wrapped around the outside, which actually became quite a focus for the ideation workshops, really, and a lot of the discussion was this idea of kind of transitioning from just selling products to selling products and services, or selling product as a service. And again, I'll share some examples of this in a minute. But I just, again, so we didn't want to look at every single possible strategy, because you'll get a headache if you try to look at everything, everything that's out there and everything that's possible. But so these are the ones that we looked at. And again, within the discussion with the working group, we sort of said, well, look, there's a number of ways of, or kind of rules of thumb around how you can think about implementing these and knowing which ones are relevant for your particular business or your particular product or your particular sector, because you definitely don't apply them all. And within the discussion, we said, trying to emphasize the idea that it's a kind of a cross-functional activity. We said it can draw in different design disciplines, so it isn't, I'm obviously biased towards product design because that's my background, but actually circular design can involve, everything from kind of strategic design and, organizational design, product design, fashion, architecture, service design, through to marketing, branding, user experience, and all those kind of other design disciplines, and they can all be orientated to support, depends on how broad your circular design strategy is, but all of these kind of design resources need to be, as I said, orientated towards circularity and applied in ways that are relevant. And then we tried to kind of narrow it down again, and we sort of said, well, look, don't just think about the design of the product or the kind of the end product. Think about the role of design in influencing, obviously, the everything from the business models and the strategy of the business, the processes, everything from, when we say processes, we were talking about logistics and manufacturing, and also then this idea of the transitioning towards services. And again, obviously the role of design is different in each of these areas, but you need to look at it more, I suppose, more systemically and holistically to how these things interact with each other. So you could spend a lot of investment and a lot of money, redesigning a product, but actually, if it doesn't match the circularity of your business model, it's a lot of wasted investment. And sometimes, the product requires a service and a well-designed service to be circular. So all of these things need to be looked at in a kind of consistent and holistic way. So as I said, we then, as a working group, we were kind of exploring different case studies, and we were using a thing called Miro, which is a digital whiteboard, where we were sharing just kind of different case examples from different sectors to see, what could we learn from. Some of them have been around for a very long time and have been used as case studies repeatedly, but it's trying to say, well, what's actually relevant for maybe some of the CIRCULÉIRE, the CIRCULÉIRE members in particular, and the working group as well. So like some of the strategies and cases we looked at were issues around, let's say, around product life extension. And so that's, how can you design a product so it's modular and repairable, so that the user can kind of keep using that product for as long as possible, and only replace elements of the product that are beyond repair over time. And we gave an example, this company Fairphone, who've actually, they seem like they've been around for a lot longer, but they're actually only established in 2013, and they were really kind of a new entrant into the whole mobile phone sector, and they had a kind of I think it's fair to say, kind of a bumpy start. It's effectively a startup moving into a well-established sector, but actually they've been riding the storm quite well, and even from kind of 2020, through their kind of circular design led approach, they've managed to actually start to increase revenue and grow as a business. And even during COVID, when obviously it was very difficult for a lot of people, they were increasing sales of their their devices, accessories and spare parts. But really what they've kind of baked in from a circular design point of view is this issue of circularity of materials and modularity, so the customer can extend the life of the product. And they back that up with with evidence around from life cycle assessment and these other kind of methods. But they can show that if the way they've designed their phone allows their user to extend the life by 3 years, they will start to see a 30% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions per unit. So again, for each individual mobile phone, it's quite small. But if you scale up that principle to a whole sector, the greenhouse gas savings could be quite significant. And again, like a lot of businesses, as I said, it's not when I talked about it being iterative, they started out in 2013 with with big ambitions and big goals, but they're having to constantly refine and reorientate their business in terms of circular design. So like even in, as I said, in 2020, 2021, this year, they've started to look back at their their business model and how they're measuring success as a business to further embed CO2 reduction through circularity as a key driver and a key KPI for their business. So even though they've had a number of generations of phones, I think they're on their third now, they will have to keep learning, and it isn't, so the circular design isn't a one-off activity that they've done once and they'll never do again. And again, just like another example, because we had a furniture business as part of the working group. We kind of looked at a company just across the water in Wales, Orange Box, and we looked at one of their specific strategies around the idea of dematerialization. So this is a company that have been producing office furniture and desks and dividers for a number of years, and they've started to embrace circular thinking quite early on. and actually, if you look at they've used one of their their strategies is dematerialization. So how can we produce as good a quality and well-functioning chair with less materials? And then if you start to look back at their their cycle of chairs that they've launched over the last number of years, how the materials have reduced over time, and so through design-led innovation, they've been able to specify materials and re-engineer products, but using much less materials, which in turn makes the product more recyclable and recoverable at end of life. And so it's like starting with some relatively relatively simple and relatively focused design strategies that can start to have quite wider impact. And so there's a number of principles that they then apply to how they manufacture, from the starting point of designing for circularity. So things like making 100% of their stock to order, so they're not sitting on sitting on obsolete stock. They ensure that there's quality in their production system, so there's minimum levels of reject and all those issues that cause waste at the production phase. But also importantly, and I suppose for their customers, is that the chair is almost 100% recyclable. And that they have the systems in place for capturing and taking that furniture back from customers at the end of life. But I suppose what's interesting when we talked about dematerialization with the working group, again, the focus tends to be on less material and less waste, but it's obviously a carbon saving as well. So even looking back and comparing this particular chair, which they launched the last couple of years, to their first chair, which is their first cradle to cradle or circular design chair, they've almost halved the greenhouse gas emissions per unit. So again, it's that constant iteration and saying, how do we keep designing for better and new products while building circularity into our thinking? And again, this Orange Box were an SME. They've gone through a number of economic storms, as a lot of businesses, and actually they've recently been acquired by Steelcase, which is a multi-billion-pound multinational furniture business. And again, it's testament to a lot of things in terms of their success. But obviously, Steelcase would also have been one of the early movers in circular design, over the last two decades. And so with Orange Box, as I said, they've made circular design part of their overall offering, but it's also helped them to innovate around new product development. And so another area we looked at in terms of case examples was the whole area of remanufacturing. And I always like putting these remanufacturing ones in, because it's something that's been done for a very, very long time. Like a lot of this stuff isn't new. And so remanufacturing is, getting products back from your customers, putting in refurbished or new components, but actually effectively you're effectively 80% of the product is the original materials and original components that it goes back out to customers. And so we've seen a lot of it in business to business over the last couple of decades with businesses like CAT and others. But it an interesting example from the automotive sector, and we put this in because the automotive sector is going through a huge transition at the moment in terms of obviously the shift from internal combustion engine to EVs, and so there's a lot of disruption happening within the automotive sector. But this example of kind of Renault, they've been remanufacturing kind of in a single facility in France for a number of years, but they've kind of sort of seen that actually, you know, remanufacturing can play a kind of a wider role in terms of, I suppose, business resilience. You know, so they're able to sell kind of remanufactured elements, engines and other parts, you know, at a reduced rate, and that makes them more competitive. But also in the process of remanufacturing, you know, they're using, you know, significantly less energy and significantly less waste, you know. And actually the remanufacturing facility, you know, in 2019, it was responsible for about 120 million in revenue, which, as part of their overall revenue base, revenues, it's quite small, but they see kind of growth in that. So what they've done is they've now effectively they've closed the original remanufacturing plant, and they're developing a new one which combines two facilities, and it's going to be the first kind of, you know, fully circular automotive sector kind of facility in 2020, and they're looking to open that in 2024 with 3,000 staff. So what's been kind of interesting is that they started small, and they've figured out what's worked in terms of remanufacturing. They've developed the processes, they've designed the products to make them capable of being cost effectively remanufactured, and then this is now a growing part of their business. Some of the other things that we looked at with the working group was this idea of the product as a service, and again we used lots of different examples, you know, but it's something that has been discussed for a couple of decades, and it's only really starting to take off in the last, I'd say, 5 or 6 years. And so the kind of examples that, you know, I suppose that people might be aware of is obviously the kind of the car sharing schemes, like GoCar, you know. And obviously for this business, you know, they don't actually manufacture the cars, but their responsibility is to design the service that allows customers to get access to those cars. And these have been sort of some of the kind of, they've had the car sharing services have had a bumpy ride, I suppose, at the beginning, but seem to be kind of taken off and are growing now. And we're seeing examples of this idea of product as a service across a range of different sectors, from lighting to solar, you know, to other sectors. And really the business model kind of flip, I suppose, is that, you know, you're not just about selling, you're not just about selling products, you're about selling access to products. And this is kind of one of the areas that, you know, that EMCO is saying, actually thinking about service design as an enabler of the circular economy hasn't really been explored, at a sufficiently high level, I suppose, in the last, you know, sort of 10 or 15 years. And this is where we sort of see, you know, a huge amount of potential happening across a range of different sectors, and particularly in business to consumer, or B2C, you know, because we have kind of a digitally enabled consumers, it makes this kind of transition much easier. I mean, I know the kind of with the history of GoCar, you know, they kind of, when they initially launched, it was really before, they were really kind of ahead of the game, I suppose, in terms of that kind of digitally enabled customer, and it was very difficult for the business. Whereas now, obviously, they're growing, and we sort of, just to kind of give as an example that, you know, this is obviously enabling the circular economy, you know, because it's shifting ownership, you know, and it's having it's a kind of intensifying product use across multiple customers. But again, I like the story because they started out in Cork with 3 car parking spaces, but now they're kind of up to almost 40,000 users in 2020. And actually, again, because they have kind of circularity kind of built into their business, it's a sign of their kind of resilience and their capability to grow. And so again, we kind of explored a lot of these examples with the working group. We also kind of discussed around the kind of, I suppose, the changing policy landscape, particularly at a national and an EU level. We didn't really look at kind of international, outside of the EU kind of policies, but the kind of, I suppose, the key kind of message that we were giving with the working group is that there's been a range of different policies, you know, over the last sort of 15 years, 20 years, you know, from Eco Design Directive to the WE Directive to all these other elements that were probably launched separately from each other, but what the kind of the move towards circular economy policy is trying to make these more coherent and get them to work more closely together to have a kind of a stronger influence on manufacturers and users of products. So within, again, you'll see it in the report when you get it, we just sort of say, look, there's been this kind of transition from looking at policies separately to look at them in a more coherent way. And some of the stuff that we were kind of more interested in, there's obviously, as I said, there's specific regulations like Eco Design Directive, and they've been recast and further strengthened. But within the European Commission's their Sustainable Product Policy Framework, they've launched a Sustainable Product Policy Initiative, which again, it's probably gobbledygook to people who aren't in the policies in the policy space, but it's looking at a range of different measures and interventions to influence the production and consumption of products on the European market. And again, if you look at the kind of the pattern that they've taken, from it's starting with improving the durability, upgrading, moving hazardous substances out of products, increasing the amount of recycled content in products while ensuring, performance and safety, incentivizing product as a service, restricting single use, all the way through to, rewarding products based on improved sustainability performances. They've started to think much more coherently around how all of these different policy interventions are going to influence companies. So one of the things that we try to do, obviously we will know that every business or every CIRCULÉIRE member will have different kind of regulatory impacts and will have different requirements. But we kind of, in the report, we sort of say, well, look, some of these will have a higher impact on design than others. So effectively, some of them will happen by default if you've actually invested in circular design, in terms of being rewarded, based on sustainability performance. Whereas some of them actually will have a big impact on design and your capability to actually make these things happen. So, even just thinking about the first point there in terms of improved durability, reusability, a lot of the discussion was, well, actually, if that's set as a business strategy, how do they then bring that down to product? And they're going to need design teams that have the capabilities, the knowledge and the skills to be able to redesign products to meet the requirements of this kind of changing policy landscape. So again, we didn't want to overburden, I suppose, the members with too much of a policy focus, but just to say that the landscape is changing and it's going to get a little bit more challenging, and it's going to become more competitive for those that are kind of moving towards circularity. But again, businesses need to be thinking about their own capacity and their own resources and their own ability to deliver. So again, conscious that's kind of a lot. These are kind of the stuff that we kind of discussed as the working group. And I suppose the key bit in the middle of all this process was the ideation workshops. So the working group members, obviously, they had been feeding back and discussing and how are these kind of issues relevant for Ireland. And we were thinking about, what are we going to do with these ideation sessions? Are we going to explore very broadly all possible circular design issues, or are we going to try to be more specific and practical? So CIRCULÉIRE, Sophie and CIRCULÉIRE kind of spent a bit of time in advance of these ideation workshops reaching out to CIRCULÉIRE members and those on the working group to say, well, look, have they got ideas in mind based on what they've heard from all the meetings that we've had and the state of the art review? Have they got ideas in mind of how they could apply circular design in their own business? And which was, so we then effectively corralled a number of, I suppose, what we call opportunity owners. So these were businesses that were part of the working group that had ideas that they wanted to explore and that they wanted to develop and maybe apply for the innovation fund. So as I said, it was kind of 3 days of workshops. And on the first day, we were doing it remotely. So we were using Miro, and it was a facilitated process where, in day one, we got those businesses and organizations that had an idea in mind, and we got them to explore, to think more broadly about their initial idea. We helped them to kind of explore the regulatory context, the customer, the user context, getting them to think about very broadly around the business model and these kind of issues. So really to use the first day to interrogate their initial ideas, go out broadly, kind of effectively stretch and pull their idea and see, does it still stack up, and still does it still make sense? Which fortunately it did for all of the groups. And then on the second day, we brought them to go into much more specific focus on the product and service design opportunities. So we had, again, it was a facilitated process where we had worksheets, and you'll see it all in the report, but we were getting them to think much more deeply around the product and service system. How is this thing going to actually work as a product? How is this thing actually going to work as a service? What is the customer journey? How are they going to, if your idea is to move towards a product service system, how is your customer going to identify it? Are they new customers, or are you trying to transition with an existing customer base? And really just trying to push a lot of the thinking from a product and service design perspective, and then just kind of from that kind of pull out, well, what are the kind of key product design implications? And again, at the end of the day two, we got them to obviously look at a lot of issues, criteria, things they need to consider, but then just pull out those that are most relevant for their particular business. And then on day three, they kind of brought those, the thinking from day one and day two into day three, where they had to say, okay, well, how is this going to actually work from your own business perspective? So you've identified the opportunity, it's relevant for circularity, you've thought about the product, you've thought about the service and how that's going to work, and now start to think about the business model and what are going to be your metrics of success. So we gave obviously the working group to tools to think about the business model, but also kind of frameworks to start to think about metrics and measures of success. So, and then effectively, how are they going to sell this back into their business, and then have this as something that they can then apply to an innovation fund to develop further. So just to give I'm conscious, I'm kind of nearly maxing out my time here, Sophie, but I'll just I'll just go through these last slides quite quickly.
Oh no, take your time. It's fine.
So effectively, over those 3 days, we had sort of 6 different, I suppose if I call them lines of opportunity, but 6 different, circular innovation opportunities that we wanted to develop, and we had innovation opportunity owners. So again, I'm kind of speaking on behalf of the businesses here. They really did a lot of the hard work and a lot of the hard thinking. But the first one that we were that was being explored was a company, Farrell Furniture, one of the largest producers and manufacturers of office and task furniture. So they sell into the public sector. They have quite large clients with the OPW and customers across Ireland. And what they were interested in is they produce really good furniture, but they wanted to the relationship at the end of life is with our customers pretty much non-existent. So they wanted to look at this whole issue of remanufacturing. How do we take the office furniture back from customers when they're finished with it, and when they're doing a refit or a refurb, how do they take it back and take responsibility for the products and materials, and how do they remanufacture their chairs? And so part of it is the technical aspects of how to design the furniture for remanufacturing, but also how to design the service so this thing actually works from a business perspective and from a customer's perspective, and actually how can the services add value to the business. So effectively offering services on top of what was the existing offering. So bringing in additional revenue through new services and stuff. So again, very interesting example, pulling on some of the experiences of other businesses, but also making it relevant for Ireland. Another kind of opportunity that we were exploring was with Novum, and so they manufacture commercial refrigeration units. They've been around for quite a long time. They have a lot of experience, and I'd say most people on the call have opened one of their products at some stage. They obviously sell through kind of Musgraves, so some of the retailers under Musgraves, but also they sell internationally to some of the largest food retailers around Europe and internationally. But again, what they were interested in is, they've obviously been doing a lot of work around, around sustainability of their business, and thinking about issues to do with, refrigeration gases and food waste and a whole range of issues. And so they wanted to think a little bit more about what they were offering their customers, and they were interested in this idea of refrigeration as a service. So like what we sort of said about, Go Car, where you're not buying a refrigeration unit, you're buying access to a car. They wanted to see how could they effectively redesign an aspect of their business model, which says you're not buying a fridge, you're buying access to refrigeration, and then they can extend the relationship with their customers over time by offering repair, maintenance services, and replacement services over time. So really, it's kind of wrapping a sort of a circular service around an existing product with existing customers. And again, just knowing the kind of even the climate impacts of refrigeration and food waste and all these kind of issues, it's a kind of a hugely exciting area to see being developed. And we also had a kind of another furniture project from GMIT. I think it's a National Centre for Excellence in Furniture Design in GMIT in Letterfrack. And what they kind of came with was a very interesting kind of challenge, which is quite different to what Farrell had initially been thinking about. So what GMIT were interested in was saying, okay, there's a whole range of, if you're going to do remanufacturing and you own the product, you know what's gone into it, you know the materials, you know where they've been sourced and how to treat it at the end of life. Whereas there's a whole range of products out there, particularly furniture products, where actually the business owner isn't there anymore. So they identified, a particular type of chair, and there's thousands of them apparently in police stations and Garda stations around the country and stuff like that. So they wanted to look at, well, these are eventually going to become a waste stream. So how do they effectively intervene, take those chairs that don't have an owner, a manufacturing owner anymore, and use kind of I suppose innovative design methods in terms of modular design, and to effectively upscale or upcycle the furniture on a large scale, on a repeatable and kind of cost-effective scale to basically prevent these products going into a waste stream. So again, what was kind of interesting from a circular design perspective, it's the kind of the ownership, and the legacy understanding of the materials and the design and the components, and how you can actually kind of effectively upcycle, but also the idea of upcycling on scale, whereas how to make that kind of cost effective, because there will be other products, not necessarily furniture products, that are going to start to become effectively waste streams in the future, and there's business opportunities from effectively preventing them becoming waste and extending the life. So again, a very interesting project, and they had lots of interesting discussions and collaborations with Farrell over the course of the ideation sessions. And then there was Surtex, which I kept saying we're kind of the newest CIRCULÉIRE member, but also probably the newest business. So they're a recent startup, which is it's a combination of two existing well-established businesses that have extensive experience and capabilities. But effectively, what Surtex are doing is they're looking at recovering mattresses and upcycling the materials into higher value products. So anybody who works in waste or anything to do with waste will know that bulky items such as mattresses are have been problematic for a very long time. So what Surtex are doing is they're combining, as I said, the two businesses that have kind of technical and business experience to say, well, we can actually develop higher value products such as acoustic insulation and kind of insulation materials for kind of thermal and acoustic, home insulation and these kind of issues. So it's effectively taking what was a waste product and upcycling it into higher value, and creating new revenue streams from materials that were previously incinerated. So a big focus for them obviously is around the kind of the business model, how that's designed, and the service and how that's designed, and then the product, which they're kind of comfortable with, but then how that's kind of sold, and how they think about the design and marketing of those aspects. So then we also had the Creative Futures Academy. So this was an idea that, and I kind of emphasized it at the beginning, is that there is a capacity gap and a capability gap in many sectors and many businesses. There are a number of kind of programs that are being design programs, in University of Limerick and Letterfrack and NCAD that we're producing kind of design graduates of the future that have sort of circular design capabilities and skills, but there's still a need to fill those kind of skills and capacity gaps within existing businesses and with existing staff. And so this kind of group are looking at, well, actually, how do we build circular design capabilities in different types of businesses in Ireland? What would that look like? What's the best way to deliver it? What are the different models for delivery? People in business don't necessarily want to do a 6-month or a 12-month course. How could we build in these design skills into businesses more effectively? And so they're working through that at the moment, and they've started to focus in on the textile sector. So they're looking at how to develop effectively a skills and capacity building program for circular design in textiles. And then the last one was actually kind of a number of the businesses on the working group had kind of suggested it as something that needs to be developed. And I feel that this might be something that will probably, and might be taken forward by CIRCULÉIRE or by a partnership at some stage. But it's the whole issue to do with measurement and metrics and understanding success from circular design. So what we'd kind of told the working group is that there's a whole range of ISO standards, metrics and other measurement tools that can be used to measure both the kind of economic, the business and the environmental impact of circular design. But really, we don't have something that is maybe relevant for all CIRCULÉIRE members in Ireland that can be kind of rolled out and kind of used at scale. So that kind of group, we're working through, what format should a circular design metric and measurement tool take? Who are the relevant sectors in Ireland, and what would that look like? And is it something that's applicable only to large businesses, or is it something that can be applied in SMEs? So there's a lot of very interesting stuff there that I think I would strongly suggest is taken forward, because it's something that businesses, those that are gone through the ideation sessions, and other businesses that are investing in circular design, they need to make sure that they understand the impact and what they're doing in terms of circular design is having an impact positively on their business, but also positively in terms of reducing or improving their environmental performance. So again, very kind of quick run through, and then just it was obviously it was an exciting sort of 3 days. So obviously the engagement from the businesses themselves, and the ideas that they were developing, and I think we kind of quite rapidly got from very early stage ill-defined ideas to fairly strong ideas that, as I said, some of them are now taken forward to apply for the Innovation Fund. But again, within the report, we kind of emphasized, we didn't go into huge amounts of detail, but we sort of said, look, circular design, it can either, as I said, it touches on all these different aspects of a business, and it isn't just about product design. And we could sort of see, looking at all the CIRCULÉIRE members, that actually there are circular design opportunities for all of the businesses and all of the sectors that are members of CIRCULÉIRE, and whether that's from the design of packaging, to the design of services, to the designing their existing products to be more durable or remanufacturable. There's a range of opportunities there for all the CIRCULÉIRE members. So what we hope is, with the report and with the resources that the open source resources that we used for the workshop, is that these are things that some of the other CIRCULÉIRE members can look at and decide whether it's something for them, and then maybe interact with those other members that were part of the Thematic Working Group to say, how can they start to take this forward, and then work with CIRCULÉIRE to make this stuff happen. So we did put a lot of recommendations into the report in terms of how we can scale this up in Ireland. And we just kind of welcome you, we welcome you to have a read of the report when you receive it in a week or two, and hopefully some of the other businesses will see this as something for them, and they can work with CIRCULÉIRE to make it happen. So I think before we kind of jump into the Q&A, I think I just wanted to end on final poll question. And sorry, Sophie, I know I've gone over time.
No, it's quite all right. It's quite all right. We have time. Main thing is you have time for discussion questions.
Yeah,
And I see a couple coming in, so
we just wanted to see, obviously there was a lot of information there. We wanted to give you a good flavor of the, the process that we went through, the effort that obviously the working group did, and the businesses that came forward with ideas for us to explore. But we'd just kind of be interested from, from the audience that are here, like what sort of circular design strategies do you think have the most potential for moving the circular economy forward in Ireland? And we've been very mean, but we're only giving you one single choice. But again, we'd be interested to see, which of the strategies kind of resonate with the audience here. So we'll again give it 10-15 seconds, and then we'll close out and go into a Q&A. Okay, Gary, maybe 5 seconds.
And actually, just while we're on this, maybe just for a second, there was a question that came up from a Robert Rose, and it was just about, I think you mentioned an 80% stat around circular supply chains. I suppose if you could maybe speak to that a little bit more. So Robert was kind of saying, where does that stat come from? Can be qualified a bit more.
Yeah, it's I'll come on to that in a second. Definitely.
Yeah, sorry.
So just looking at the responses there, circular supply chain, that's an interesting one now. So it's the dominant one, and so the circular supply chain kind of covers a lot of aspects from kind of material selection, move into kind of renewable materials. So that's quite interesting. And then product life extension, which again, it kind of is a number of different kind of strategies. So again, that's quite interesting. But the product durability seems to be the least favored of all the strategies. So that's, again, now obviously this is a bit mean because we made you pick one option, but maybe we might speak to that I think the third one there's the product as a service and dematerialization kind of came in equivalent. So no, that's very interesting. So maybe we can maybe some of the questions around circular supply chain. So so we in terms of move on to the Q&A then. So will I stop sharing my screen, and is that it? So you don't have to see, so I can see.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Great. So that 80%, it's actually become quite contentious. I think it's become quite contentious. It's been around for quite a number of years, and I can't remember the original reference, but it was from a journal paper in I think it was the Journal of Industrial Ecology, and I probably should have put up the exact reference, but I can never remember the name of the authors. And if you do want to email me, I'll send you the original paper. But it's used by the European Commission quite a lot, and I've always qualified it, and hopefully I qualified it when I mentioned it, is that for some products and for some sectors it could be up to 80% is determined at the design stage. Whereas I think it really depends on the type of product and the type of sector. And maybe think about it in simple terms, and this is something that we discussed with the working group, where if you're, say, producing food products, actually 80% of your impact is in your supply chain. So actually, what you effectively design, in terms of packaging or whatever, has quite a minimal impact. So I'd sort of say it's and I'm not undermining the European Commission here, but it's like it can have a significant impact, whether it's 80% or 75%, or 95%. To me, it doesn't matter. I think it's relevant for, you have to look at whatever product and whatever sector you're in, and then the role of design and influencing choices around materials and manufacturing, and then you'll sort of see what actually it can have a significant impact. But if the person who asked the question does want to email me, I can find the original journal article from it might have been from two decades ago, I think, at this point.
Yeah, I'll if it's okay, Simon, what I'll do is I'll pop your email into the chat, and so the person can actually email you afterwards. And just to say, I actually gave a similar response, which is basically from CIRCULÉIRE's point of view, what we will normally do is go into one of our kind of industry members. We'll actually do an assessment, baseline assessment, and a kind of circularity assessment around where is the registry of opportunities around, whether it's in supply chain, if it's in production, where is it that we can actually make the most impact by implementing circular design strategies. So and definitely it will obviously hugely depend on the sector. If you're working in pharma, medical devices, that's obviously heavily regulated. That has a bearing on the kinds of circular strategies you can actually safely implement.
Exactly.
So yeah.
And I mean, it was kind of like that. I try to always caveat everything with, it depends. It really depends. And we had this we had this discussion the other day with the member group where we're talking about, we were asking about bioplastics and biomaterials, and I was trying to be adamant to say it's like it isn't that simple to transition from one to the other. It's about looking at what are you making, what's your product, what's your sector, and then making material choices around that, and don't always assume it's one or the other. And I think that's similar with this 80% thing. It really depends. We'd have to look in, whether it's doing life cycle assessment or whatever it is, or like that kind of the audit that CIRCULÉIRE do to really understand what the register of opportunities are before you can make a kind of a really clear statement for your own business.
Absolutely. So we had a question from Jean Clark, just asking, in the GMIT example, was ergonomics, health and safety considered, as health and safety can be a barrier to the companies reusing office furniture?
Yeah,
so,
no. So it's. I'll be speaking on behalf of GMIT now, and I'll probably undersell all this, but in terms of, but like that absolutely has to be part of the circular design thinking, and remanufacturing or upgrading or upcycling is like, it's all about, you're not, there's no way you can undermine product quality. So, and I think this is what's kind of interesting with what they were trying to explore. And this, again, maybe I kind of glossed over it a little bit, but like, I think Jean, might be aware that the challenge sometimes with that kind of remanufacturing upcycling is if it's done on a small scale, a small batch scale, or one-off, there's obviously product, liability risks and all that kind of stuff needs to be considered. Whereas what GMIT are exploring is like, how can this be done on scale so that you're able to, effectively look at a product and to be able to develop new kind of, technical drawings and understand the components and understand all the materials, and then effectively remanufacture it so it's as good as before, considering all those kind of health and safety issues and stuff as well. So it is a real challenge for kind of like the reuse and upgrade. It's ensuring that kind of product quality is maintained and even improved. That could be, there could be options for, like, this particular chair was designed by an Irish designer, I think in the 70s or the 60s, and so the manufacturer doesn't exist anymore. But and obviously it was a high quality, high value chair because they're still being used. But actually they might be able to even improve, the ergonomics and the usability of the product while thinking about the circularity. So you can't have those kind of trade-offs, particularly around product quality.
We also got another question in from Emma Little, which was just asking around ISO accreditation. Is there ISO accreditation currently? And I kind of made a first stab at answering that. I know that there's currently accreditation in development for circular economy in general, not specifically for circular design. So feel free to interject.
And that's kind of, there are various standards, quality standards, environmental standards, and it's a little bit of a minefield actually, particularly for SMEs. And it's similar to what I was saying about the European policy landscape, as those things were being developed almost sort of separately from each other. So I think that the move is towards kind of combining existing standards, and that's what ISO are doing around the circular economy. Within that, there'll be elements that are more relevant to design, but effectively it'll be part of a single, standard family as such. So it was one of the things that we had on the Miro. Sorry, did I explain what the Miro board is? Miro board is like a digital whiteboard. So the working group were able to share kind of links, case studies, resources, and materials. And we had a specific section on the kind of the ISO standards and other national and subnational standards that are relevant to design. But the overarching thing we were saying is these are all being pulled together to be made kind of more coherent. And what's making it kind of a little bit challenging is that there's a separate stream of work happening where there's a number of organizations, from the UN, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, different people who are developing kind of indicators and frameworks and metrics for kind of measuring, product circularity or service circularity and stuff like that. So a little bit of a risk from a business point of view is the ISO stuff is becoming more coherent, and then they have all this mix of different metrics and measurement tools that are being developed by, say, different types of organizations, and so there'll have to be a choice made, from a business perspective to pick which is the right one for them. But I'd like to sort of see that being standardized. And that's what that kind of group that we're looking at, kind of metrics and measurement, it's kind of like, well, how might we kind of develop something that's relevant for Ireland, and Irish sectors and stuff like that. So, but yeah, so it's a bit very roundabout way to say there are standards, but it's just, I think they're being kind of made more coherent and they're being pulled together, and there are kind of metrics and tools. Obviously, again, we're being very conscious that some of the larger businesses on the working group, they would already be well established with ISO, and some would have the resources to do life cycle assessment and carbon footprinting. Whereas we also have to consider the kind of the SMEs and the smaller businesses that don't have the resources to invest in that type of stuff. So we need to have something which is relevant to them as well.
Thank you, Simon. Okay, so I have another question in from Scott Burnett, and this is in the chat. He says, so the key aspects seem to be circular design has to be activated at business model level. Very hard to achieve any impact without this happening. Businesses should look to work with design and designers across a much wider set of challenges, not just, and he says, quote, the product. And his ask is, with that in mind, are there any takeaways for what businesses or designers, including consultants, agencies in-house, can do now?
Yeah, I suppose I don't know the business, so I'd like to have a proper chat and figure out what their capabilities are. But a lot of what we were saying is about building circular design literacy amongst your design teams. So that's even getting on the first step of people being aware of what this is, what the implications are in terms of how they design their existing performance metrics and that kind of stuff. But also from a bit, if it's being pulled from the top, it's about making sure that there's design capability at a more senior level within the business, and that can actually strongly link kind of business strategy to circular design implementation. But really the kind of the first step is work with the design teams to build their kind of literacy and capability. So literacy is a bit of a strange word to use, but so that they know what it is and they're happy and comfortable talking about it. And sometimes it's about starting with single products. Don't think you have to redesign absolutely everything. Like, and I kind of talk about Orange Box a lot, but just like that they started with single chairs and built the capabilities and the skills within the team and the confidence to know how to do it. And obviously then it made sense from a business perspective, all the stuff that they were putting into the design was carried through to the kind of their business model and their production facilities and stuff. But they've used that one or two chairs to start with, to then scale that capacity across the design team. And just to say thanks again, Joe. Like We Ireland, we obviously did a survey. Like Elise from We Ireland did a survey for us, asking about, for some of the large electronics producers, OEMs and stuff, around kind of circular design and how they're using design and how they structure design in their business. And again, we could see that some of them were coming back and saying, well, they're already starting to develop kind of training programs and capacity building programs around circular design. So so again, in a very roundabout way, start with the design team to make sure that they know what it is and they're comfortable with it. If you have to develop specific skills, do that. But it does need to be pushed further up, like that. The business model, and the strategy, and it needs to make this stuff implementable and real, and to invest in the design team to be able to do it. And it was one of the things in our kind of circle diagram, we did have strategic design as a design discipline that could be relevant. So being able to design business models and design service systems and all those kind of things speak to decision makers within the business.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to say that would be one reflection from CIRCULÉIRE, certainly ensure that you have good C-suite kind of representation and cross-departmental representation as well, because more and more of these circular kind of design considerations affect different kind of functions and departments as well. So having a few of the key people at the table is important.
And sorry, it's also there's no this isn't, I mean, it's kind of linked because it's something that we discussed, that it isn't like a one size fits all everything circular design perfect for everything for every organization. Like, even if it's a case of looking at communications and branding, and starting there, and just it's, yeah, I think start where you are, but don't assume that there's a perfect endpoint where suddenly you're like 100% circular design capabilities. This is going to take time, so it's just as a set a vision and build in the capabilities and start with the design. So, sorry,
No, not at all.
explaining.
No, it's all good. So I'm going to give there's some responses to some of the questions, but what I'll do is I see Warren Phelan has put in a question, so I'll just respond, or I'll just highlight that one first. So he asks, do you think the perception or view that products made from recovered materials has changed, and what do producers need to do to change this perception?
Well, I'd sort of say, I'm not very good at saying definitively, because I haven't seen the research on it, but I think the consumer acceptability of product sharing, so kind of using, sharing cars, that kind of stuff with other customers has definitely changed. I think there's, for certain product categories, reused materials aren't like mattresses and stuff. It still won't fly with certain customers, but like, for me, the thing would be is it needs to function as well and look as good, as what the customer was used to previously. I don't know what products Warren is talking about, but if there's some products, to me, it's like, if you can design it in a way that the customer doesn't even know, from that point of purchase and through use, that it is a recovered material, it doesn't affect the kind of the consumers or the customers' experiences of the product. And I think in some sectors, people are kind of looking for it, in like food packaging and other areas. Now, sorry, I don't want to take us off on a tangent, but that opens up a wider set of challenges, where sometimes the materials that look like they're being reused or recycled maybe don't perform as well, and actually can cause further problems. So I feel like, Warren, I'm talking around it, but I think I really need to know the kind of the products that you're talking about. But there's definitely changes in kind of consumer expectations around, ownership and what they perceive to be, sustainable materials. Whether they are sustainable or not is the other thing. But if you're thinking about implementing something, you need to just do some user research and consumer testing.
Yeah, I was going to say, I believe it was PwC who did consumer market research, and they were saying that on average Irish consumers are willing to pay 40% more for more sustainable products. So I think there's definitely a change in terms of, if you can market, and again, that's that point of bringing your branding and your marketing along on the journey. If you have a compelling story around a circular product, it can actually be the unique selling point, so I think certainly there's a change from that one stat anyway.
No. So that thing about the kind of willingness to pay, there's lots of willingness to pay studies for different types of products, and people will always state that they will pay more, but then actually when it comes to purchasing, it still needs to come. It needs to be high quality design.
Absolutely, it needs to perform well. Absolutely, yeah.
So the reality at kind of point of purchase, whether it's food products or whatever, the decisions are quite rapid, habitual, all that kind of stuff. Whereas, I think the main thing would be if you're thinking of doing something, you're going to have to test it with your users or your customers to really know if it's going to fly or not. That's the but don't use it as an excuse for bad design.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop, we're doing a feedback survey here, so I really appreciate that everyone is still with us basically now. I would just, if you don't mind, in the last few minutes, we can continue the chat, but just if you wouldn't mind giving some reflections on how you found today. We always want to improve. We want to hear your reflections on what we can do next and what we can do better. So please do fill that out, and we'll take those comments on board. So we'll keep on going anyway with the chat. So I actually will go back to some of the other questions. So Little actually responded to the point that you had said around ISO accreditation. She just said, I wonder if consumer rights organizations could be involved to prime customers to demand products have a circular economy supply chain as part of their rights for a sustainable world.
I would say I'm sorry, I don't know at an Irish level, but I know that definitely at a European level, consumer rights agencies are working around circularity and right to repair and
right to repair, yeah.
a whole range of, so very much is, and sorry, just because it's not on my radar in terms of what kind of consumer rights organizations in Ireland are working on, but it is definitely happening. And it's also happening kind of at a even at sort of at an NGO level where, like that whole issue of right to repair, a lot of that kind of the momentum around that to kind of shift policy was actually being driven by, kind of NGOs effectively around Europe and small activist groups that were, demanding this stuff, and so sorry, this is a whole, it is, I mean, if Emma's concerned that that stuff isn't happening, there is a lot happening, and I can see, I'd say the right to repair is an example where I think that kind of push, from a kind of a consumer rights perspective, actually has started to shift policy, and then that will then ultimately affect design, how you design the products to ensure that right to repair is upheld, so
Yeah.
but it is a huge, the whole consumption bit is a huge area, but yeah, no, there's a lot of interesting stuff happening, and it's now prompted me to look at what's happening in Ireland with our kind of consumer rights agencies.
Okay, no, spot on. I'm conscious that we are nearly out of time, so I suppose I'll take this last question, and Helena, I'll respond to your question around how cities can support the circular economy in text. So this is a question from Jean Clark. I'm just saying, can you confirm if you have decided on some projects to go through to the Innovation Fund from the working group? And yeah, so maybe I'll just quickly speak to that point, Jean. So it's always determined by, is there a project owner who wants to apply? So we've set it up in that way that, we're more than happy for people to apply. We won't, be a gatekeeper if they want to, but it's do they have the kind of interest in actually advancing something? And so we have got 2 different projects that are interested. Well, it's actually technically 3 really, because actually, so GMIT and Furniture have actually merged their project into one. So they're doing they're testing out 2 different kind of circular economy strategies around furniture. So furniture remanufacturing and kind of design for repair. And that's been advanced now. We actually were hoping to have Furniture speak today, but they're head down with their proposal. So the deadline for it is actually end of this week. So they couldn't join today, sadly. But then the other one is, what was the other? Oh, so we've actually also got Design Crafts Council of Ireland and Creative Futures Academy joining, and that's around a kind of a design. Do you want to speak to that one?
That's a skills and capacity one.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's the Creative Futures Academy, which is a collaboration between NCAD, IADT, which is the Institute of Art and Design and Technology in Dún Laoghaire, and UCD. And then they're working with the Design and Crafts Council, and they're looking at effectively like a circular design skill, training program, skills development program, capacity program. So, but they're going to focus it in on the textile sector in Ireland. But I suppose that whole skills area is a huge thing that needs to be tackled. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do. But also in the working group there was University of Limerick, so University of Limerick and Limerick School of Art and Design, separately from CIRCULÉIRE, are developing a circular design training program as part of SkillNet and stuff. So I think the CIRCULÉIRE working group has kind of raised all these other initiatives that are also happening in Ireland as well, that we need to kind of promote and to kind of push out. But then some of the other ones they're looking at, some of the other businesses they're looking at applying at a later stage as well. So that's just to bear that in mind.
Thank you for that. So I suppose what we'll do is move on, but I was just going to say, Helena asked, how can cities support circular economy? And I'm mindful we don't have enough time to get into. This could be a whole very rich discussion, Helena, which I wish we did have time to. How can cities support the circular economy? So what I'm just going to...
Is it cities or city as in the business city bank?
Cities, no, cities, like at the kind of regional level. So I was just going to say that Donut Economics Action Lab do some really great resources looking at how circularity can be embedded in things like, city planning and the like. So I'll send you I'm going to drop in a link just looking at that. But for anyone who is kind of working at that kind of local authority, regional level, I definitely would encourage you to check that out. There's some good examples of Amsterdam has used it to really come up with some very concrete circular economy action planning at the city level there. So I suppose we can just maybe go to the final slides, Simon, unless there's any other.
Yeah, sorry, there are others. I'll try and, I don't know if you're going to, when we email out the report.
Yeah, we could include some links.
There's the whole circular cities, and we did put it in our description. It's product services, but we were talking about infrastructure and systems, and that's kind of what we were getting at. So there's people looking at even placemaking, and how to make kind of, the neighborhoods that people live support the circular economy in terms of waste and resources and stuff, then scaling that up to kind of a city scale. So a lot of very interesting stuff happening. And we had somebody from a local authority on the working group as well. So so if I didn't get any of the questions, maybe I'll try and might do like a note when we send out the report. I'm just suggesting that now, Sophie.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Just for all the questions.
We can send out some additional resources. So just to say to everybody, in terms of next steps, we'll be following up with recording and with some links to the final report, which will be produced in the next 2 weeks. There's also going to be an infographic and a kind of a summary report. So we'll signpost you to all of that. We'll send this to everyone who attended as well after. The other thing as well, I suppose, is just I wanted to quickly flash this up and we'll just drop a link into the chat now. But actually, CIRCULÉIRE is going to be joining this 2021 conference. It's the National Manufacturing Supply Chain Conference at the RDS. It's going to be in person at RDS, Simon's Court, Dublin, on the 24th of November from 10 to 1 p.m. So there'll be a chance to hear more from CIRCULÉIRE strategic partners and industry members, and the speaker lineup will soon be confirmed. Another save the date, and again, what I would say is do follow us on social media just to keep in touch with us about some of these upcoming events. You'll see it on LinkedIn and on Twitter. So on the 6th of December, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m, it's going to be our annual Circular Economy lecture on Zoom. And we're going to have guest lecture from Tom Zaski, who's the CEO of TerraCycle. So for any of you who may know, he's basically rolled out a huge reusables kind of system in a number of different contexts. So do follow us on CIRCULÉIRE's social media channels to stay tuned on more announcements about that as well. So I'm conscious we just run over time now. So just on behalf of the CIRCULÉIRE team, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Simon for chatting us through today, but also for the stellar job he's done in guiding our panel members through the whole process. It's been a really enjoyable learning process for me, certainly. Also just to thank the panel members themselves. They've been really generous in their time, their expertise, sharing any reflections, and really thinking through where are there opportunities to move the dial forward around circular design in the Irish context. So just huge thank you to you all, and thanks to all of our lovely participants as well for joining today. Really appreciate you taking the time out. So thank you very much and have a lovely day.
Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.